So, Kat, I'd love to kick off listening to your story, right? I know all the lovely things you do, but I would love to learn a little bit about what got you to this beautiful journey of healing people for a living.
Yeah, man, it was a long one. So I, starting at probably 10 years old, started having these weird symptoms. I think it probably started with the gut. I had, typical hormonal acne as, a preteen teenager, but that just didn't go away. I would get sick all the time, like all the time. And it would take me probably 3 months to fully get better. And then I would be feeling good for a month. And then I would be back to being sick again. So that was really rough.
If you were to go back to to younger Kat, what would be like the steps and the groundwork habits that you would try to instill within Kat to slowly streamline her path towards healing?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I like there's certain things that I would recommend to her that would be a matter of finding the right support, finding the right people, which I know I was trying to do, but I didn't quite know how to do it, and I don't think there were quite as many people that I needed back then. So finding the people who could order the right tests, who would take more time with me to really understand my case and kind of play health detective. I think having the right professionals in your corner to give you answers is obviously the ideal. But take away that as an option, right? Whether you can't find it or, it's not in your area or what have you, or it's not available to you. I definitely back then struggled with my relationship with food quite a bit. So I would eat really healthy during the day, but at night I would like binge on sugar. I would go into the pantry and get all the different cookies and crackers and snacks and just kind of lay it out on my bed and binge on that. And that obviously was exacerbating all of the kind of root cause issues that I had. So all that sugar was feeding the fungus and the bacteria and all the things. And I was loaded up on gluten and dairy, which obviously I had no idea at the time that I had Hashimoto's, but those are very big triggers. So I think if I could have had the awareness to, because back then it was anything around diet and food was about being skinny and was about restriction. And that's what led to the binging. So if I could make that mindset shift of you are eating to feel better, to fuel your body. I was a dancer at the time, like to understand that connection that food is not skinny, food is fuel. I think would have really helped me not make the decisions that I was making that were really intensifying the issues that I was experiencing.
Wow. And during that time when you did decide to make the ultimate switch and cut out gluten and dairy, did you feel like there was a dip in like the quality of your life when, of course that does limit your food options, and of course beforehand in those times of binge eating, that definitely, like was something that might have became like a household habit, and like now you're just eradicating that from your daily routine.
Yeah, so I will say, and maybe I'm an oddball in this, but also maybe not. I've definitely had a number of clients who have experienced this too. The binging stopped being even a temptation when I started to actually understand how foods affected my body. So when it started to be about eating for health and not for a certain weight, I just kind of stopped struggling with the binging for the most part. Like every once in a while, I might get a little bit of that pull, but by and large, like it wasn't even a temptation when I made that shift.
My follow up there, Kat, is when you are talking to people with these issues, how do you develop your discretion in understanding which like foods to eliminate? Because from what I'm learning from you, it's only the foods that kind of look similar to those of the thyroid that will get attacked, and that could exacerbate the overall complications. So what are like how do you how can we is it tests, or is it like a certain intake form, or like certain questions we ask them? How does that look?
Yeah, also great question. So because I get a lot of people who ask questions about food sensitivities, because that is something else to be mindful of. Is there are the foods that drive up antibodies, whether you're sensitive or not. And then there are just food sensitivities that you have that are causing damage to your gut lining, which is causing basically food and toxins to escape into the bloodstream where they're not supposed to be, which then also kind of aggravates the army. And it's like, oh, there's more bad guys, right? So there are those kind of two routes of how your body can negatively react to foods, that it's going to negatively impact your inflammation and your thyroid and whatnot. So with an elimination diet, that's going to be the most effective, because I get a lot of questions about the food sensitivity tests. And the fact is, number one, they're like, the science just isn't quite there yet. They're not very accurate. Because what often happens, so a lot of times the tests are going to be an IgG test, which your IgG is basically an immune marker. And first of all, there's 4 different IgGs and it often only tests one. So that's problem number one. The other problem is you have to have eaten the food recently for there to be a sort of immune memory of that food. And then problem number 3 is if you have, like I said, leaky gut, you are always going to show up as having food sensitivities to the foods you eat often, because those food particles are constantly escaping into your bloodstream, again, where they're not supposed to be. And so now your body has created antibodies for them. Doesn't mean you have an innate sensitivity to it. It's just your gut is leaky. And so you're eating a lot of those foods. And so your body is attacking those foods. So it can create a lot of food fear where it's not necessary. And it can cause you to eliminate foods when it's just not necessary, which could potentially limit your nutrient intake and that sort of thing. There's an MRT food sensitivity test that is a little better, but it is significantly more expensive. So it's, I think, $400. And what that is doing is it's looking at your, like, live in the moment, your white blood cell response to foods. So your white blood cells can basically eject hundreds of different mediators when it encounters a food it doesn't like. And so an MRT test is going to look at, is there any kind of negative response of that white blood cell? And that means that your body doesn't like it so much. But again, I would say that, like, it's going to create a lot of food fear. It's not necessary. If you do the healing work to get your gut to a good place, that's going to fix a lot of those food sensitivities. So my recommendation is usually doing an elimination diet. We usually will eliminate a lot of those gluten, dairy cross reactors. And then sometimes, depending on the case, we might, like, if they've already done something like that, maybe they've already eliminated gluten and dairy, they've tried different diets, nothing has worked, then we'll start to look at things like nightshades. Then we'll start to look at things like some of the top food sensitivities like eggs. Sometimes we'll do legumes and kind of see. It just depends. I try to avoid that as much as possible. I want to keep as many foods in your diet as we can. But if you're just one of those stubborn cases that it's like we're missing something, then we got to kind of go deeper.
That makes perfect sense. What's the timeline on that? Like, if there is a food that you're kind of doing a trial for and trying to see how it reacts with a client's body, how much time do you give to understand, okay, is this good for me, or this might be something that we want to eliminate?
Yeah, you have to eliminate it for a minimum of 27 days. I usually round it out to an even 30. With that said, sometimes you need a little bit more time. So if you really want to be, like, absolutely positive, like, a 90-day elimination is phenomenal. Some people just mentally, they can't get to that 90 days and they're like, I got 30 in me and that's it. And I'm like, okay. So it's by the individual, but 27 days is the minimum for us to basically, in that 27 days, what's happening is we're calming the immune system down. We're taking away all of the quote unquote bad guys. So the army is like, okay, we can go home. So that when we reintroduce the food, we can actually see how our body is responding to it, because our immune system isn't kind of keeping it at bay. So a lot of times people be like, well, I eat dairy every day and I feel fine. Meanwhile, they're tired and they have digestive issues and whatnot, but, like, they don't notice a difference from day to day. And it takes eliminating the food and then reintroducing it back to really actually see how it's impacting you. And they'll do that, and then they'll have dairy and they're like, oh my God, I had, like, horrible digestion the next day. Or, oh my God, I got so bloated when I had gluten. So we do need that time to kind of clear the antibodies.
The question was, how was it, like, when you did cut out dairy and sugar? Was there any, like, how was it that by any chance did it affect, like, quality of life overall?
So when I did my first elimination diet to really see how different foods were affecting my body, that part was tough because it was more extreme. Because it wasn't just eliminating gluten and dairy. It was all grains. It was sugar. It was even high sugar fruits. It was fermented foods. Like the list was quite long. So that was tough, but I just had it in my head. I was like, you just got to do this for a few months. And so that the short term aspect of that really helped, because I was just like, just every time I struggled with it, I'm like, this 3 months is going to pass in no time, and you're going to be so pissed at yourself at the end of it if you cheat and you're like, oh, but what could have been if I had just stuck with it. So that was kind of my mentality to get me through the initial phase. And then when I did, because when you do an elimination diet to see how foods affect you, you do a slow reintroduction to see how the foods affect you. And when I would add back in gluten and all of a sudden I'm super fatigued again, or I add back in dairy and all of a sudden I have a huge breakout on my face and my chest and my back, the temptation for those foods went away. So there was definitely an adjustment period of having to learn and find the brands that I liked, and having to, obviously ask the questions at the restaurants and that sort of thing. But really, it didn't take long because, right, honestly, we're so lucky to live in the time we do because we have so many options. Restaurants are very well versed in dealing with people with food sensitivities. So it's not that hard once you just make that mental commitment of like, this is life now. This is the new norm.
Got it. And is there like a black and white rule as to what foods feed the pathogenic bacteria and what foods feed the beneficial bacteria?
That's a little bit more nuanced. So like you want to be able to say that by and large, eating things like sugar and processed foods and gluten and dairy and things like that tend to feed the pathogens. The more beneficial foods, or the more, stereotypically healthy foods, lots of fiber, lots of plants are really good for the good bacteria. But there is some nuance in there. So for example, a lot of times because hypothyroid women's digestion tends to be slow, food tends to sit in the GI tract too long, and so it feeds bacteria and can cause something called SIBO, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. And those bacteria actually feed on fermentable carbs that are found in some really healthy foods. So things like cruciferous vegetables, so broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, things like apples and pears. So if you notice that you're someone where you feel like you eat really healthy, but you get super, super bloated after having a lot of vegetables or after having certain, fruits and that sort of thing, you very well may have something like SIBO that's actually at play, that you may need to temporarily eliminate those foods while you work to eradicate that particular bacteria, before you can bring those foods back in a healthy way.